Pleasure to me all at last, and welcome back to films I should have talked about years ago. So let's just say that first of all, when it comes to well-known films out there, I've covered quite a lot of them. From Joker, to Captain America, Civil War, to tons of others out there. There's lots of films that I definitely should have talked about many years ago, at the time that they came out especially. But now's the time where I go in to talk about something else from the 1980s. Definitely underrated, definitely a classic. A classic that I would certainly rank higher than the majority of others from that exact decade. Tom Hanks, Turner, and Hooch. Released in 1989, like many other films that came out the same year, including the remake of Little Shop of Horrors, Ghostbusters 2, as well as various other films that also came around during that exact time period. So let's just say, first of all, we're getting into some well-known territory right here. Because many of you probably have talked about it, but I'm pretty sure that you're not like me. I myself am a guy who likes to dig deep into this kind of stuff at all costs. So anyways, Turner and Hooch is basically a lot like the classic buddy cop cliche that had already been inherited by many other films out there. I've talked a little bit about some of them as well. RoboCop, Lethal Weapon, and even a little bit of some others here and there like Starsky and Hutch, and even you got yourself many other examples out there. The 1980s was chock full of a lot of these things out there. Turner and Hooch, however, is a much different story. Instead of two human characters, you have one, and a dog. So who would have thought that they would come together so well? It's that sort of detective vibe that comes together along with a canine partner. If you thought that McGruff the crime dog was the only sort of thing out there, then well, take a look at Hooch. Hooch, of course, is one of those rare breeds of dogs on screen that actually does probably one of the best jobs out there. And let me tell you, first of all, the dog itself, born in 1978, I was 11 years old at the time, but eventually died at age 14 in 1992, and yet still left quite a big set of memories for us to cherish over. The film Turner and Hooch was, of course, the most prominent. Hooch, of course, certainly should have gotten the best sort of care and treatment, because how else do you think this little thing could have been able to act so well as a police dog of any sorts? Well, anyways, when it comes to the plot line, it's as simple as this. A detective by the name of Turner, who's played by Tom Hanks, is out in a small city as a small detective, but is eventually hoping to move into the big city to work with a major police department in the state as a way to have a much higher level in terms of the detective career taking place. But before that can happen, Turner has to solve a few cases before then. Just before being able to move down to the big city, Turner does have to solve a few cases relating to some pretty nasty crimes out there. We see Turner at first with a small bag of money out there and giving out that classic method of posting the money around in the form of posters around the town in order to see who is the actual owner of that money. Of course, that is still quite a big thing today. Whenever we find something that happens to be lost or stolen, we try to find who is the actual owner here. The only big difference is that we happen to use social media for the most part, instead of printing out pictures on posters and nailing the posters to certain lampposts and poles. In Turner and Hooch, however, it's pretty much just the classic method of printing and utilizing posters all over the town. Well, anyways, Turner comes across a pier inside of a boathouse where there lays an old person with an extremely aggressive guard dog. When Hooch first makes an appearance on the screen, This, of course, was years before other big dogs started to come onto screen, like the Beast from The Sandlot, or even all the dogs from Homeward Bound and 101 Dalmatians live-action films. Hooch is unbelievable during the first appearance. It comes up as sudden as possible, and it makes us feel like we're watching a classic slasher flick. It really does. Except here, the killer is a dog. But unfortunately, it's what you think. The dog itself is not a killer, but is instead friendly towards some strangers. But not all of them, and Turner is one of those unlucky few. However, though, the original owner of the dog ends up dying after getting murdered. Hooch is forced to come along and live with Turner. And let me tell you, that is by far the best scene in the movie. The first night that Turner and Hooch are living together in the same house, a lot of problems take place. Hooch is leashed up outside of the house, but ends up howling and barking so bad that the neighbors end up coming along and pretty much giving out some weird threats. One neighbor goes as far as to attempting to try to convince Turner to shove a Tylenol pill down Hooch's throat. And I tell you, what happens afterwards? With Turner getting locked outside of the house after Hooch's butt bashes the door, causing it to lock upon contact, that right there is one of the greatest moments in Tom Hanks' film career that I've ever witnessed. Tom Hanks getting locked outside by a dog. I tell you, I hope to parody that scene one day, where I myself get locked out of a house by maybe Choo Choo the Yorkie, who knows. But we got a long ways to go before something like that actually happens. Still, that is probably the best scene in the movie that I remember, at least. Otherwise, well, you got Hooch basically going as far as doing a lot of other crazy things. Chomping on car seats, and basically going as far as to possibly attacking other people for no entire reason. Well, anyways, Turner and Hooch basically ends the way you think it is. Yeah, I feel like cutting to the end right here is just as simple as it needs to be. Hooch ends up getting killed by the actual killer who was behind the murderers in the area. And as soon as Tom Hanks has a somewhat climactic battle going on, well, as soon as the actual killer is taken out, Hooch ends up dying right there in the arms of Turner. As gut-wrenching and as heartbreaking of a moment as it is, it really is a good example of how man's best friend can really end in the ways that we truly hope for. Hooch went from being an incompetent, rebellious canine breed to being a lovable, humble partner in a detective lifestyle. And the real ending to this film shows how Hooch had gotten in love with another dog over at a salon. And apparently they got busy. So busy, in fact, that several puppies had been showing up around throughout the end of the film itself. Turner goes in, and well, what do you know? One of the puppies happens to bear a lot of resemblance to that of Turner's own Hooch itself. So that right there is quite an ending. Turner and Hooch is really a classic that does deserve way more recognition than ever. As a result, let's go ahead and bring out the score to it. 8.4 out of 10. Right there. So that's a bit high the way most of you would probably see it, but the way I see it personally, it is an incredible film. Such unbelievable camera work, writing, and acting that takes place. Lots of good effects, and some pretty chilling music that helps to accompany the many scenes that this film does happen to offer. It's pretty simple and humble, but I give it a pretty high score, mostly because of these amazing things that happen between different characters. Turner and Hooch, two different animal species in the animal kingdom, two different behavioral traits, two different patterns of life. but yet they both come together like bread and butter very easily. This is certainly a bit of a masterpiece in its own right. It may not be as well known as many other films that came out during the same year, but that's only because a lot of people seem to overlook the high-end potential that this film delivers at all costs. So with that in mind, that concludes Turner and Hooch, a big chapter in this book. But let's head on to the next chapter with tomorrow's topic. But if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.